Well, the real breaking news of the night is that Donald Trump has stopped aid to Ukraine. The unnamed White House officials who have leaked this story to NBC News, The Washington Post, and other news organizations are using the word pause, not stop. But that's the word they used when they claimed they paused the humanitarian aid being delivered to starving babies in Sudan. The food that was being delivered to children in the middle of a famine. They paused that. That pause killed starving children and is continuing to kill starving children because the truth is it was not a pause. A USAID official was immediately put on administrative leave when a memo emerged this weekend in which the official explained that even though a judge has ordered them to do it, the Trump administration has made no attempt at all to restart the funding and the machinery for that humanitarian aid at USAID, which includes life-saving drugs and food for people, children and adults, who are starving to death. And so when the Trump White House team uses the word pause, we have reason to believe, and Ukraine has reason to believe, and the world has reason to believe, that Donald Trump might never resume any form of aid to Ukraine. The Washington Post reports that their White House source said, quote, the decision could be reversed if Zelenskyy demonstrates a good faith effort to participate in peace talks. That is exactly what President Zelenskyy demonstrated in the Oval Office on Friday when he was confronted with a very bad faith effort, first led by J.D. Vance, then followed incoherently by Donald Trump, to simply insult the president of Ukraine, much to the delight of the dictator who Donald Trump seems to think of as a comrade in arms.
Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff.
Was it a phony witch hunt? Yes. Vladimir Putin was accused of all that stuff because he did that stuff. Here is some of what Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin went through together.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
And immediately after that, Russia, Vladimir Putin, did release Hillary Clinton's emails. The Mueller investigation, which Donald Trump claims proved nothing, actually proved that the Russian government, led by Vladimir Putin, did indeed do everything they possibly could, including the spread of lies online, to help elect Donald Trump president of the United States, which the Russian government did again last year, and will always try to do for the candidate who they think will help Russia more than Ukraine. The first president of the United States to earn the title leader of the free world was Franklin Delano Roosevelt in World War II. When World War II began, with Adolf Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939, which was the mirror image of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the United States Army was the 17th largest army in the world. We were not ready for World War II. But by the time the United States entered World War II, President Roosevelt was in the middle of a military buildup that would make the United States the most powerful military force on the planet. President Roosevelt made the key decisions that won World War II in Europe and in the Pacific. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill was opposed to President Roosevelt's plan for a massive military invasion on the beaches of France across the English Channel to drive Nazi Germany out of France. And so were some of the commanding generals, American generals, who were serving President Roosevelt. But the president persisted with his strategy, winning Winston Churchill's support only at the last minute for the D-Day invasion, for what turned out to be the decisive military operation of World War II in Europe. And while Franklin Roosevelt was planning the D-Day invasion and other tactical victories in World War II, President Roosevelt was designing what would become the United Nations, the institution he hoped would be the preserver of peace worldwide after the war. Franklin Roosevelt did not live long enough to see the opening of the United Nations in 1946, and the term leader of the free world was not widely applied to American presidents until the Cold War era, when the United States and the Soviet Union, led by a Russian dictator, were locked into a decades-long standoff with nuclear weapons aimed at each other 24 hours a day. The free world was easily identifiable as the countries who elected their leaders in free and fair elections. The cruel dictatorships, like the Soviet Union and China, who had been our allies during World War II, represented the other side of the Cold War. Those adversarial positions held even after the Cold War thawed. But now Donald Trump, for the first time in American history, has become the president who is changing sides in the middle of a war. The last leader to do that, the last head of state to do that, was Adolf Hitler in World War II, when he suddenly, and intemperately to say the least, after conquering Poland and France and other countries, turned and attacked his ally, the Soviet Union. No other European country has ever done that, which is why, after Donald Trump's incoherent, raging performance in the Oval Office on Friday, European leaders embraced President Zelenskyy in London this weekend, vowing to continue to support Ukraine against a murderous Russian dictator war criminal in every way they can. While Donald Trump was yelling in the Oval Office Friday, the war criminal Vladimir Putin was firing missiles and drones into Ukraine all day long. Ukraine on Friday didn't fire a single shot across the Russian border into Russia, not one shot. And so the President of the United States is no longer the leader of the free world or even a defender of the free world. The free world has rallied around the leader who, though struggling with a language barrier, tried to cut through Donald Trump's lies in the Oval Office on Friday. President Volodymyr Zelenskyy might never be called the leader of the free world, but he is, without a doubt, the bravest leader in the free world. Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona. He is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee
a lot of glare here.
And the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to, first of all, get your reaction to what happened in the Oval Office on Friday.
Well, I met with Zelenskyy before that. We had a great meeting. Cameras were out of the room. What I saw in the Oval Office was what feels like a setup, and where Donald Trump and J.D. Vance feel like they're demonstrating a certain amount of strength. What they really showed the American people and the rest of the world was weakness, abandoning our ally at their most needed time. I mean, this war has gone on now for 3 years. It does need to end, but it doesn't need to end by the United States of America switching sides. That is a mistake. I don't think Donald Trump understands, or I don't even think he has the capacity to understand what he just did. But this was a colossal error, and if it is not corrected, I think it's going to haunt our country for decades.
And also tonight's news that they are, as they put it, the Trump White House puts it, pausing all aid to Ukraine. What happens next?
Well, what happens next is more Ukrainians die. That means more women, more children, more old people. They're not going to be able to fight off attacks from the Russians without the security assistance that we give them. I've been to Ukraine a couple times. I know J.D. Vance hasn't. Donald Trump hasn't. My colleagues on both sides of the aisle, many of us have. I met with folks in Patriot batteries who every single night are shooting down cruise missiles and ballistic missiles from the Russians. If they don't get help from us, those missiles get through. Putin targets schools and hospitals to try to intentionally kill civilians. This decision tonight by the White House means more innocent Ukrainians will die.
Can Europe rally now to a point where it can replace, to some extent, the American aid?
Hard to replace us. You talked about how we're the leader of the free world. We have been since FDR. I think we've been even before that. And I don't think Donald Trump understands leadership. He doesn't understand FDR or Churchill. He doesn't understand history. Can the Europeans step up? It looks like they're going to try to. But without our leadership, without our assistance, this gets very, very hard for the Ukrainians. And by the way, it gets easy for Russia. This is what Russia wants. The Kremlin just today, Lawrence, said that this was largely their vision. This is what they wanted. They now have Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and I guess to some extent, Elon Musk on their side.
How many times have you heard President Zelenskyy say thank you?
It seems like every other sentence. He did on Friday in our meeting. He has a habit of saying thank you to the American people, thank you to Congress, thank you to this president, thank you to Joe Biden. I don't think I've ever met somebody that is more appreciative than Zelenskyy. I mean, he understands that how much help we are giving them. He gets it. And without it, his country doesn't survive. And if we don't get back in there and give them the assistance that they need, Russia is going to win this thing. And make no mistake, Putin wants to put back the Soviet Union, put it all back together, and he'll pick his next target.
Do you think there's any hope of Republican senators taking any action here?
Well, Lisa Murkowski stood up and said, put out a strong statement the other day. I think there is some hope. However, especially after this election, many of my Republican colleagues have unfortunately fallen in line, and they will parrot whatever Donald Trump says. If he changes his opinion on something, if he switches sides in a conflict, many of them will just get in line right behind him. And that's really unfortunate. And the consequence of all this, Lawrence, is that as a country, we are less safe. As an individual here in the United States, you are less safe. Your family is less safe. Our future is less safe.